Picture the most expensive table in England. 200 feet of white linen pressed so hard it shines. Silver gilt cups worth more than the houses of every person who will ever be allowed to touch them. A great salt cellar, gold and crystal, standing at the head of the board like a small castle, which exists mostly to not be used. Now fill that table with food: swan, peacock, porpoise, sturgeon with fennel, jellies built up in layers like stained glass. And understand one strange thing before we go any further. The man who paid for all of it will eat almost none of it, and his sons will not eat it at all. Add a king who signs his initials on every single page of his own account books. Add a 10-year-old boy, round-faced and loud, who is fed by schedule, watched while he chews, and will one day become the widest king in English history. Add several hundred servants who are forbidden to sit down in his presence, a corridor that smells of beeswax and cold boiled beef, and a counting house where a man with ink-stained fingers knows the price of everything in the building, including you. That's the court of the first Tudor, Henry VII. The king history remembers as a miser who kept one of the most magnificent tables in Europe. Both of those things are true at the same time, and the space between them is where you are going to live tonight. A place where you could watch a year's income for a whole village carried past you on a silver dish in the morning, and eat yesterday's bread standing up in the dark by night. We're going back there tonight. Not to the famous Tudor court. Not the 6 wives. Not the enormous kitchens. Not the king with the turkey leg you've seen in every painting and every documentary. That's the son. That's 40 years later. We're going to the father's court where all of that was invented, weighed, argued over and written down in ink that still survives. One thing before we go in, because I want to be honest with you. The rooms in this story are real. The dates are real. The feasts, the ordinances, the account books with the king's initials on every leaf, the wedding, the 2 funerals, real, and historians can read them today. But the boy whose hands you'll be wearing tonight is stitched together from all the real nameless boys who scoured that silver and carried that water, because history kept the spoons and lost the children. Everything he touches is documented. He himself is the one thing I've made. And when we reach the parts that historians still argue about, I'll tell you plainly which is which. So I make these history stories, and honestly, I've given up trying to work out whether anyone actually sleeps to them, or whether you're all just weirdos who enjoy hearing about scouring sand, funeral wafers, and a king who counted his own spoons. Either way, subscribe if you want. Get comfortable. Here we go. Your knuckles are bleeding into the sand. Not badly. Just the little cracks along the joints. The ones that open every morning in the cold and close every night by the fire. Splitting and healing and splitting again, until the skin of your hands looks like the bottom of a dried up pond. The sand you're rubbing into the great salt is fine white river sand, sieved twice, mixed to a paste with vinegar, and it finds every one of those cracks like it has been paid to find them. You keep scouring. It is somewhere between 4 and 5 in the morning, in the last week of October, in the year 1501, and you are kneeling on the stone floor of the Uri at Westminster, with the king's great salt of estate held between your knees like a stolen child. The only light is a single tallow candle which stinks of sheep. The only sounds are the hiss of sand on silver, the river wind pressing at the shutter, and the voice of Master Avery, gentleman usher, counting. 1 salt grate of estate, silver and gilt, with a cover. 1, answers Master Geoffrey beside you without looking up. 2 basins of silver, parcel gilt, with 2 ewers to the same. 2 and 2. 12 spoons, silver and gilt of the best sort. 12! This happens every morning and every night. Every piece of plate in this room, every basin and ewer and spoon and cup, is counted out loud by one man and answered by another, and marked with a pen by a third who isn't even here yet because clerks sleep longer than boys. Nothing in this house is trusted. Everything in this house is counted. You have been here a year, and you could recite the count in your sleep, and some nights, on your straw mattress under the stairs, you do. The salt between your knees is worth more than the village you were born in. I need you to understand that this is not a figure of speech. It is a lump of worked silver, gilded with actual gold, about 1.5 feet high, shaped into towers and battlements, with a hinged cover so that no one can slip poison into the king's salt. If you sold it, you could buy every house, every barn, every pig, every plough, and every church bell in the parish of your childhood, and have money left over for the next parish. And your job, at 4 a.m, is to make it shine, without scratching it, with sand, in the dark, with bleeding hands, while a man counts it in front of you in case you swallow it. Welcome to the Ewery of the King of England. October 1501. Your name is Nicholas. You're 13 years old, and you've been at court for a little over a year, brought in through the side door of favour, the way everyone at court comes in through some door of favour. Your mother's cousin is a groom of the pantry, and when a boy of the Ewery died of a flux in the spring of 1500, your cousin spoke to a yeoman who spoke to a sergeant, and a place was found. You arrived from a village near Ware in Hertfordshire, 2 days' walk away, with one change of shirt, a wooden comb, and a piece of advice from your mother that you have thought about every single day since. Keep your hands clean and your mouth shut. At court, both of those are actual paid skills. The Ewery, if you've never met the word before, is the office of water. That sounds small. It is not small. In a royal household, every department has a name and a territory and a jealousy, all of it laid out in written ordinances. The pantry keeps the bread, the buttery keeps the ale, the cellar keeps the wine, the sorcery makes the sauces, the chandlery keeps the candles, the laundry keeps the soap, and the Ewery, your kingdom, keeps the water, the basins, the towels, and the table linen. Every cloth that touches the king's table passes through this room. Every drop of scented water that is poured over the king's fingers before he eats is warmed and carried by hands like yours. Every napkin, every towel, every ell of white diaper cloth woven with little diamond patterns you can only see when the light slides across it sideways, counted in, counted out, marked in a book, because here is the first thing you learned at this court, and it is the thing that runs underneath everything you will see tonight. Nothing here is ever lost. It is only ever accounted for. Master Geoffrey taught you that. He is the yeoman of the Ewery, your master in everything but name. A dry, flat-voiced man of maybe 50, with a face like a closed ledger, and the cleanest fingernails you have ever seen on a living human being. He has served 3 kings. He does not say which ones with any warmth. On your first morning, when you dropped a towel on the floor and picked it up and put it back on the pile, he did not shout. He took the towel, held it up to the candle, folded it the other way, and set it apart, and then he looked at you for a long moment. That cloth touches the king's mouth, he said. The floor touches everything else in the world. Now it goes to the laundry and it gets written down, and someone asks why. Everything in this house gets written down, boy. The count is the truth. Not what you say, not what you meant. The count. The count is the truth. You have heard him say it maybe 400 times since. You will hear it again before tonight is over, in a place and on a night you cannot yet imagine, so you scour. The sand hisses. Your knees have gone from aching to numb, which is the good stage, the stage where they stop bothering to complain. Across the room, under the second candle, another boy is working wax into the leather of the water budgets, the great stiff carrying vessels like leather barrels with shoulder straps that haul water from the conduit to the Uri board. That's Hugh. Hugh is 15 from Southwark, which means he was born on the wrong side of the river and knows things you don't. He has been in a Uri 2 years longer than you, sleeps on the mattress next to yours under the stairs, elbows you in his sleep and talks constantly, in a low mutter pitched precisely to die 2 feet short of Master Geoffrey's ears. It is a professional skill, like juggling. He is doing it now. Know what I heard in the woodyard, he says, not a question, working the wax with his thumbs. Spanish princess is at Dogma's Field, in Hampshire, been on the road since she landed at Plymouth, and the king rode down to look at her. To look at her? Spaniard said no. Said in Spain the groom doesn't see the bride till the wedding, veil and all, custom of the country, orders of her mother, and the king said, Hugh pauses for effect, because he always pauses for effect, that she was in England now, and he would see her if she were in her bed. You stop scouring for a second. The story has the shape of the king in it, and that is how you know it might be true. Not warm, not cruel. Just a man who has paid 2 years of letters and treaties and escort ships for a thing, and intends to inspect the thing. And did he? Walked straight in with the prince, saw her face, liked it well enough, they say. Hugh shrugs, wax squeaking under his thumb. Fortnight from now she's here, and then it's the wedding, and then, little Nick, you are going to find out what this house looks like when the purse actually opens. You think you've seen a feast, you've seen Tuesday, you haven't seen a wedding. Less noise, says Master Geoffrey from the other side of the room without turning around. Silence. The sand hisses. The candle spits. Somewhere above you, in the dark bulk of the palace, a door booms shut, and the sound rolls down through the stone like something falling down a well. 2 basins, parcel gilt, 2 ewers to the same, 12 spoons of the best sort. The count goes on, and the morning hasn't even started yet, when the count is done and the plate is locked in its chest. 3 locks, 3 different keys held by 3 different men, because this house trusts arithmetic and nothing else. You go for water. This is the part of your day your body does without you. Down the back stair, through the long dark of the servants' passage where the walls sweat cold, out into the courtyard where the air hits your face like a slap from a wet hand. October air, river air, thick with the smell of the Thames at low tide, which is a smell you have given up trying to describe to anyone who has not stood in it. Mud and salt and fish and rot and coal smoke, all of it braided together, all of it sitting at the back of your throat like a coin. The conduit stands in the yard, a lead-lined cistern fed by pipes from a spring, and this early it belongs to the boys. Bakehouse boys, scullery boys, boys of the chandlery with tallow already in their hair. You fill the leather budgets one at a time, and the cold comes off the water and into your hands and settles into the cracks the sand opened, and you stand there in the dark with your breath steaming, holding 40 pounds of water on your shoulder, waiting your turn at the second spout behind a scullery boy who never ever hurries. 40 pounds, then again, then again. The Uri drinks water the way a fire drinks wood, because water at this court is not for drinking. Nobody past the age of 7 drinks plain water if they can help it. The ale is safer and everyone knows it. Water here is for washing, and washing here is not hygiene. Washing here is theatre. And when I say theatre, I need you to understand what that means at the court of Henry VII. This is not a man splashing his face. This is a ceremony with named roles, written down in ordnance books, rehearsed like a coronation. Before the king eats, water is warmed and scented and carried in a silver ewer by a man of rank. Never by you. You carry it to the door, and rank carries it through the door, and poured over the royal fingers above a silver basin, while a towel of fine diaper waits on the shoulder of a kneeling gentleman. The king's fingers are not dirty. That is not the point. The point is that a room full of the most dangerous men in England stands bareheaded and silent, watching water fall, because the falling of that water says, "This table is a kingdom, and the kingdom has an order, and every one of you is in it, somewhere, below the man drying his hands." Your whole office exists to make that moment happen twice a day without a single visible seam. Back inside, Master Geoffrey has opened the linen presses, and the smell of the ewery takes over from the smell of the river. Clean linen, lavender and rosemary. Along the wall stands the herb chest, a low oak coffer with the split lid, and inside it, in linen bags, the dried herbs for scenting the washing water. Rosemary above all, sharp and resinous, bought in bundles, rubbed between the hands into the warm water, until the steam smells like a hillside in August. You love that chest. You have loved it since your first week, when the whole world of the court was still a terror of shouting and locked doors, and you lifted that lid and the smell of rosemary came up at you like something kind. Rosemary for the king's fingers. Rosemary, Master Geoffrey says, for remembrance. That's what the country people hold. The ewery holds that it kills the smell of tallow on a boy's hands, which is worth more. You will meet that chest again, twice, before this story lets you go. I'll say no more than that. Then the linen itself. This is your true apprenticeship, more than the water, more than the sand. Cloth. The ewery of a royal household holds table linen the way an armoury holds swords. Hundreds of pieces, ranked and graded. Plain cloth for the household boards, twilled cloth for the officers, and for the king's own table, diaper and damask, white on white, patterns of diamonds and flowers woven into the weave itself, cloth that comes across the sea from Flanders and costs. You know exactly what it costs, because knowing is your job. Cloth of 4 shillings the ell and better, when a man who digs ditches earns 4 pence a day. 1 ell of the king's tablecloth, 1 arm's length of it, is 12 days of a ditcher's life. The great cloths run 20 ells and more. You do that arithmetic standing at the press, with the folded weight of it in your arms, and then you stop doing it, because the sums come out in years, and it is easier to carry an armful of years if you don't name them. Every piece is marked. In the corner of each cloth, each towel, each napkin, a small device pricked in thread, and every piece has its line in the clerk's book. Delivered in, delivered out, to the laundry, from the laundry, worn, stained, condemned. When a towel is condemned, too worn for the king, too holy to throw away, it is cut down for lower service and written down again. A tablecloth in this house has a longer and better documented life than you do, which is why you keep the lath. Nobody told you to. That is the point of it. In your first month, a napkin went missing between the ewery and the laundry. 1 napkin, diaper, marked. and for 2 days the whole office walked on knives while the clerks hunted the line where the Count broke. It turned up sodden behind a laundry trough, fallen, innocent. But you had seen something in those 2 days that frightened you more than shouting. You had seen that when the Count breaks, the blame falls downward until it lands on someone who cannot pass it lower. And you're the lowest thing in this room. So now, under your mattress, you keep a scrap of oak lath, a foot long, split from a firewood billet, and a nail to scratch with. Every load of linen that leaves your arms for the laundry, every load that comes back, a notch on the left edge going, a notch on the right edge coming. Your own Count, secret, worthless in law, unreadable by anyone but you. Master Geoffrey has his book, the clerks have their rolls, the king, you will learn this soon, has his initials, you have a stick, but it is your stick, and on the day the Count breaks again, and it will, that stick is the only thing in this palace that will speak for you. Remember the stick. By 7 the boards are laid. You and Hugh carry the trestles into the hall, the long tables of the household, and dress them. Cloth, salt, bread, spoons for those entitled to spoons. The hall fills for dinner at 10 in the morning. Dinner is at 10, supper at 4, and yes, that means the working day starts in the middle of the night. You have stopped noticing, and it fills in order, always in order. This house would sooner burn than lose its order. Officers at the high end, yeomen below them, grooms below them, and at the door end, pages and boys and the young gentlemen sent here by ambitious fathers to learn what a court is by carrying things across one. You do not sit. I want to be accurate here, because this is the sort of thing the ordinances actually legislate. There are places and times where a boy of your rank eats sitting, at the second serving, at the far board. But on most days, in the press of service, you eat away the lowest servants of every great house in Europe eat, standing, in the passage between hall and ewery, a lump of yesterday's cheat bread in one hand, and a scrap of boiled beef in the other, chewing while you listen for your name. The ordinances of this household, written out fair in 1493 and 1494 when the king overhauled his house, will tell you exactly how many messes of meat a duke at this court is served, and how many a bishop, and how many an usher. Your food is in there too, in its place at the bottom measured. There is no cruelty in it. That is what you cannot explain to your mother in the 1 letter a year a chaplain writes for you. Nobody starves you. Nobody beats you more than custom allows. You're simply, precisely, arithmetically, the smallest number in the book. And the strange thing, the thing that will take you this whole story to understand, is that the man at the top of the book eats nearly as plainly as you do. You have seen the king at table perhaps 30 times now, always from the edge of the room, always in the 2-second gaps between duties, which is the only way a boy sees anything at court. Henry, 7th of that name, by the grace of God, King of England and of France and Lord of Ireland, a lean man in his mid-40s, which at this court is not old, but is beginning to be discussed. Grey-blue eyes, thinning sandy hair gone grey at the sides, a dark gown, good cloth, no great show of jewels on an ordinary day, and on an extraordinary day, jewels that stop the breath in your chest, and we will get to that. He sits alone under his cloth of estate, raised above the hall, because a king of England dines alone, above everyone, in front of everyone. 40 dishes may be carried to that table on a feast day, borne up the hall in procession while trumpets play, every dish tasted first against poison, every cover lifted just so. And the king takes a little of one thing, a little of another, eats slowly, neatly, sparingly, like a man paying for it personally, which, as it happens, he is, and knows it to the farthing. Drinks watered wine, finishes early, washes your water, your rosemary, and sits back while the untouched glory of it is borne away. The first time you saw it, you thought, he doesn't want any of it. Why does he have it? You were 13 and knew. It was a fair question. Tonight, by the end, you will know the answer, and so will you, listening. It is the answer to the whole reign, and to the title of this story, and it fits in one sentence, and I am not going to give it to you yet. Where does the food go? That question you asked out loud, your first month, and Hugh laughed. But Master Geoffrey answered, because it is an accounting question, and he cannot help himself. The dishes go down the ranks. What leaves the king's table goes to the great officers. What leaves theirs goes lower. The fragments and the broken meats go into the voider, the great basket, and the voider goes to the almoner, and the almoner's men carry it to the gate. Where the poor of Westminster are already waiting, nothing lost, everything accounted for, even mercy in this house is a ledger line. You know the gate end of that ledger personally, because carrying the voider is boys' work. Twice a week it is your work. You know the faces that wait at the gate the way you know the count of spoons. The old men first, then the women with children, then, always last because she's small and the crowd is not kind, a girl younger than you, quick-eyed, wrapped in a man's cut-down russet coat with the sleeves rolled into fat cuffs. Joan, the porter calls her, when he calls her anything. She waits at the left post of the gate, out of the crush, and she watches your basket come the whole width of the yard with a stillness that is worse than begging. The first time you gave her bread from the top because she was nearest. Every time since you have told yourself it's because she is nearest. Keep her too. This story does not spend people, and neither does that house. It keeps them, and it writes them down, and at the end it settles every account. That is the kind of story this is. That was the kind of house it was. Now let me show you the room the whole palace is actually run from, because you are about to be sent there, and the errand will teach you more about this king than a year of watching him eat. It is mid-morning, 2 days after Hugh's news from the woodyard, and Master Geoffrey puts a folded paper in your hand. The clerk's reckoning for the month's linen, he says, to the counting house, into the hands of a clerk of Master Heron's, no other hands, and you wait for the answer. He looks at you the way he looks at a towel he is deciding about. Walk. Do not run. Running boys get stopped and ask questions. Walking boys are furniture. Walking boys are furniture. You've repeated that to yourself in doorways ever since. It works. The counting house is not grand. That is the first shock. You cross 2 courtyards, climb a narrow stair that smells of damp stone and candle smoke, and come into a long low room above a gateway, and it is plainer than the Uri. Trestle tables, iron-bound chests along the walls, a small fire kept small, and cold light from north windows falling on 8 or 9 men who do not look up. The sound of the room is the sound of nibs. Scratch, scratch, dip. A clerk sifts a heap of tally sticks. Real ones, the exchequer kind, hazel, notched, and split. The government of England still runs on notched sticks and will for another 300 years. Look it up. I had to. And the sticks click against each other like dry bones. This is the chamber system, and I need you to understand it, because it is the engine of the reign. The old way, the exchequer way, was slow. Money crawled through process, and by the time the king knew what he had, the year was over. This king pulled the money out of process and into his own house. Revenue flows to the treasurer of the chamber, Master John Heron, a real man, his real accounts survive. And the chamber answers to nobody but the king himself. And here is the detail that everyone who studies this reign eventually stops at, the detail you're about to see with your own eyes. At the far table, alone, sits a man in a dark gown with his back half to you, running a finger down a page of entries line by line. And at the foot of the page, when the finger reaches the bottom, the man dips a pen and writes, small and quick, 2 letters and a scrawl. The King. The King of England is in the counting house, checking the sums and signing the page. Not once for show, every page. His monogram sits at the foot of leaf after leaf of the chamber books, thousands of leaves across the reign, in his own hand. That is documented. The books are in the archives. Historians have turned every one of those leaves. No other king of England did this. Kings hunt, kings dance, kings sign treaties. This king audits. You stand against the wall with your folded paper, next to a chest with 3 locks, and you watch a middle-aged man read columns of figures in cold light, and you understand something that you could not have put into words at 13, so I will put it into words for you now. This is the same ceremony as the water. The Great Salt says the table is a kingdom. The initials say the kingdom is a table, something a careful man goes over every night, line by line, so that it will still be there in the morning. He was not born to this. That is the part you only half know from kitchen talk. Born in Wales, at Pembroke, to a mother who was 13 years old and already a widow. 14 years hiding in Brittany with a price on his head. A man whose supper depended on other men's promises. He landed with borrowed money and borrowed soldiers, and won England in a single morning at Bosworth in 1485, 16 years ago, when the crown, men still say this in the buttery, quietly, was picked out of the field and set on his head. The kitchen version says a thorn bush. Historians will argue about the bush for 500 years. Nobody argues about the lesson he took from it. Everything can be lost in a morning. Count everything. A clerk takes your paper at last, reads it twice, and makes you wait on a bench while the answer is written. And because clerks are men, and men talk over boys as if boys were benches, you sit there for half an hour and learn things. You learn that a Venetian who visited this court wrote home that the king's wealth was beyond that of other princes, and that his people said he was loved for his justice and feared for his fines. You learn, because 2 clerks are checking the entries out loud to each other, monotone like a catechism. What actually goes through these books? Item to the keeper of the king's leopards. Item to the children of the chapel for singing before the king. Item to a woman that brought the king cherries in reward. Item delivered to the king's own hands for his losses at cards. Losses at cards. You hear it read out flat between leopards and cherries, and the clerk does not smile. And that is how you learn the strangest true thing about this famously careful man. He gambles, moderately and often, at cards and dice and tennis, and when he loses he pays, and when he pays it is written down. The miser of the history books recorded his own losing streaks for posterity in a fair clerkly hand forever. Historians did not invent that. They just had to read it. So, which is he? You will hear him called the Miser King for the next 5 centuries. That portrait gets its final varnish from Francis Bacon, writing 120 years after this morning. A brilliant man describing a king he never met. And the fines and the bonds of these later years are real. Ask any nobleman currently holding his breath under a suspended debt. but the same books show the other hand. Jewels and plate bought across the Rhine for sums with more zeros than any noble house in England could survive. Tapestries from Flanders, a new palace rising down river, so splendid men are already calling it a wonder, and, being cut and sewn at this very moment in this very city, a wedding meant to be talked about in every court in Europe, tight-fisted daily, boundless on the great occasions. Both are in the accounts, both are true. Hold both, because the wedding you are about to serve makes no sense without them. The answer comes back sealed. You carry it down the stair, walking furniture, and on the way back through the second courtyard you smell the one smell in this palace that always finds you. Hot wafers. The wafery is a closet of a room off the way to the kitchens, and it belongs to old Piers. He is the yeoman waferer, 60 if he is a day, bald as an egg, forearms scarred to the elbow with small pale burns like a sky of stars, and he makes one thing, wafers, the thin crisp biscuits of flour and sugar and rose water that are served with sweet wine at the Void. The little ceremony of spice and wine after the great eating is done. He makes them with long-handled irons held over coals, 2 irons going at once, and the batter hisses when the hot plates kiss it, and the whole passage smells like a baker's dream of heaven. Piers was at Bosworth. He tells everyone this in the first hour they know him, and then never again, which is how you can tell it is true. He was a boy with the baggage of the old king's army, the losing army, and when the field was lost he walked south and cooked for whoever paid, and ended by the long, strange arithmetic of a working life, holding the wafer irons of the man who won. He has watched this court from the coal end of it for 16 years, and he has a saying he deals out like alms, one to a boy, when he thinks the boy needs it. Today, apparently you need it. He looks at you over the irons as you pass, sees the sealed paper, the careful walk, the ink smudge on your knuckle from the counting-house bench. "Been up to see the abacus, have you?" he says. It is not a question. He flips an iron, hiss. "See him signing?" "Aye." "Good. Now forget what the buttery says about him." He slides a finished wafer off the iron with a wooden blade, pale gold, thin as a leaf, and lays it on the linen to crisp. They call him cheese paring because the ale is small and the fires are counted. Boys talk. "I've fed 2 courts, boy. The old king ate like a lion and paid like a ghost. This one eats like a clerk and pays like a king. When paying is the point. Watch what he spends on, not what he saves on. Magnificence is a tool. He keeps it sharp, and he keeps it in the sheath, and that, hiss, flip, is why it cuts when it comes out. Magnificence is a tool. Say it once and it sounds like a compliment. Say it twice and it sounds like a warning. You'll have reason, before 2 winters are out, to say it both ways. He gives you a broken wafer, the crumbs of trade, and the sweetness of it sits on your tongue all the way back to the Ury, where Master Geoffrey takes the sealed answer, reads it, nods once, and says the only thing he ever says when the count comes out right, which is nothing. That night, under the stairs, Hugh cannot sleep, and therefore neither can you. He lies on his back in the dark, cracking his knuckles one at a time, and recites everything the woodyard knows about the wedding to come. The princess's dowry, 200,000 crowns, half of it landing with her, a number so large you both just lie there and let it pass over you in the dark like weather. The pageants the city is building along the route, 6 of them, castles and mountains on carts, with children dressed as saints and astronomers to speak verses. The lords coming in from every shire, each with 100 liveried men, every one of whom will need his board laid and his towel counted. And the little Duke, Hugh says through a yawn. Prince Henry, he's to lead her through London, they say. 10 years old. He laughs into the dark. Poor sprat, all that. And I hear his grandmother still has it written down what hour he's put to bed. You fall asleep before he stops talking. You usually do. Outside, the tide turns under Westminster, and the palace lies on the dark river like a lid on a pot. And far down the black water, at Ludlow on the Welsh border where you have never been and will never go, a 15-year-old prince with careful handwriting is learning to govern a country he will never rule. You don't know that yet, neither does he, neither does anyone. Sleep while the house sleeps. It is the last quiet week this reign will ever have. The preparations begin like a tide coming in. Nothing you can point to, and then everything at once. First it is cloth, carts of it, up from the wharves, bale after bale, swung down and carried past the Uri door on porters' shoulders. Say what you like about this king, the man buys cloth like a conqueror. Then it is plate, borrowed and hired and unlocked from chests men your age have never seen opened. Then it is people. The household swells by the day, extra hands sworn in for the season, carpenters and painters and joiners moving through the courtyards with their tools on their backs and everywhere, cutting through the ordinary noise of the palace like a knife through bread. The voices of gentlemen ushers rehearsing men in where to stand. And in the middle of it, one morning, Master Geoffrey takes you and Hugh across to see the place where the greatest of the feasting will be, because he says a man cannot serve a room he has never stood in when it was empty. Westminster Hall. You have seen it from outside every day for a year. Seen it and stopped seeing it, the way you stop seeing a mountain you live on. Inside you have never been. And when Master Geoffrey leads you through the small door in the north end and the space opens over you, your body does something embarrassing and entirely correct. It stops walking. The hall is 240 feet long, 67 feet across. You could stand your parish church inside it and have room to walk around the tower. It was raised by William Rufus, the Conqueror's son, 400 years before this morning, begun in 1097, and when men told him it was too big, he said to have answered that it was not half big enough, and whether he truly said it or not, kings have been trying to live up to the size of this room ever since. And overhead, this is what your neck is doing while your feet have stopped, is the roof. There is nothing else like it in England. There may be nothing else like it in the world. 100 years ago, King Richard II had the old roof taken off, and a new one raised by his master carpenter, Hugh Herland. Oak, 600 tons of it. Hammer beams leaping out from the walls into empty air. Carved angels on the beam ends holding shields, arch upon arch of timber climbing into brown shadow, the whole span held up by nothing you can see. No pillars, 67 feet of open air bridged in wood, by men whose grandsons' grandsons are now dust, and it stands. It is standing while you read this, the same actual timbers, over 500 years after tonight's story, having outlived the palace around it, 2 fires, and 1 very large bomb. When I tell you the past is real, this is what I mean. You can go and stand under that boy's same roof on a wet Tuesday and crane your neck at the same angels. Eyes down, says Master Geoffrey, who has seen the roof before. The angels aren't laying the boards. The hall is a building site. Scaffolds against the walls, men on them hanging tapestry, arras from Flanders, woven with gold thread, scenes of old wars and old gods, each piece worth a manor and each piece inventoried, because of course it is. Carpenters are raising a stage of timber at the south end, stepped, for the display of plate, a cupboard of estate 7 shelves high, where the king's gold will stand during the feasting, not to be used, only to be seen, a cliff face of wealth in candlelight. You will spend a night of your life at the foot of that cupboard, awake till dawn, guarding water. Not yet. Master Geoffrey walks you the length of the hall, and his flat, dry voice lays the come-in feast over the empty floor like a cloth. Here the high board on the dais under the great south window, here the reversion boards, here the boards for the mayor and aldermen, here the Spaniards. Pray for the interpreters. Uri board here, in the alcove. Water passes along this wall, never across the floor. A boy carrying a basin walks behind the arras line, invisible, always invisible. They must see the water arrive, he says, and never see it travel. Ceremony is a bird. No one wants to see its legs swim. It is October the something, 1501, and you are a village boy standing in the largest room in England, being taught which wall to be invisible against. Your grandfather ploughed behind oxen 60 miles from here, and never in his life saw a room that could hold more than 40 people. You will serve 600 in this one. It's that close, one life to another. That's how history actually works. Not marble, doors. The days after that lose their edges. You sleep less, scour more. The sand gets through the cracks in your knuckles and into your dreams. And it is in that fog of preparation, on the last day of October, that you do the thing you will spend the winter paying for. It happens in half a second, the way the worst things do. You're scouring a gilt spoon, one of the 12 of the best sort, the king's own pattern, and your hands are tired, and the tallow light is bad, and the spoon slips, and instead of letting it fall soft on the folded cloth like you were taught, your tired hand snatches at it and drives it, bowl first, into the iron rim of the water tub. The sound is tiny. Tick, that's all. A fingernail's sound. You bring it to the candle, and your stomach drops out of you the way it does when you miss a stair in the dark. There, on the lip of the bowl, is a dent. Small. Smaller than a barley corn. The kind of thing no eye would ever find unless the eye was looking. Every eye in this house is looking. That is the entire and only religion of this house. You should take it to Master Geoffrey now. This minute. Say, I marred a spoon, master. Take the punishment while the punishment is small. You know this the way you know the Count, and you stand there in the candlestick with your heart going like a rabbit, and you think of the clerk's book, and the line where a marred spoon becomes ink, and ink becomes questions, and questions land on the lowest thing in the room, 3 weeks before a royal wedding when every officer's temper is a drawn bowstring. And you do the other thing. You turn the spoon dent side down and you lay it in the chest with its 11 brothers, and you say nothing. The plate is counted by number, not inspected by candle. At the daily count, 12 spoons. 12 will be answered. It can wait, you tell yourself, till after the wedding, till the house breathes again. Then you will confess, or mend it against a boxwood form the way you've seen a silversmith do. The dent is small. Nobody weighs the spoons until the audit, 12th night, when every piece of plate in this palace is weighed. You know that too. You put the knowing away in the same place you put the arithmetic of years, and you close the chest and the 3 locks click 1, 2, 3 like a sentence beginning. Nothing is lost in this house, only accounted for. You have just become the first thing in the Uri that is both. 2 days later the count breaks, and for once it is not you, and what you do about it is the thing that changes your winter. It is the linen. With the household swollen for the wedding, the laundry is a battlefield. Double loads, hired washerwomen, cloth moving at all hours. And on the 2nd of November the clerk's book says the Uri sent 48 diaper towels to the laundry, and the laundry's tally says 47 came in. And between those two numbers opens the little cold gap that everyone in this palace fears more than fire. A towel of the king's diaper is worth 8 pence. That is 2 days of a master craftsman's wages for a towel. But the price is not the terror. The terror is the word taken. Taken means a thief in the house, 3 weeks before the King of England shows his table to Spain. Taken means questions and searches, and a household officer with a white staff standing in your Uri, asking who carried the linen. You carried the linen. Master Geoffrey does not accuse you. He does something worse. He goes quiet and starts reading his own book backward, entry by entry, lips moving, like a priest hunting a lost soul. And you stand by the presses with your ears roaring, and then you hear your own voice say, small and steady, "Master, count my stick." He looks up. You fetch the lath from under your mattress, and you stand in front of the yeoman of the Uri and explain your private tally like a felon explaining his knife. Left edge, loads out. Right edge, loads in. A cross scratch for every 10th. And this morning's marks say, you make yourself say it slowly, 4 loads out, and the 4th load was short, not stolen at the laundry, short from the Uri door. Because the 4th basket was packed by the hired man, the extra hand sworn in on Monday, and you carried it, and it was light, and you thought you were tired. 47 went. The book is wrong, not the laundry. A long silence. Master Geoffrey looks at the stick, and then at you, and something moves behind his closed ledger face that you've never seen there before. He takes the book, finds the entry, and there it is. The hired man had called the count aloud at packing and called it wrong, and the clerk had inked what he heard. 1 number, 1 tired voice, 1 obedient pen. The 48th towel is still in the press, misstacked under the twilled cloth, where it takes him 30 seconds to find it. The gap closes. No thief, no white staff. The clerk scrapes the entry and corrects it, muttering. The hired man gets a hiding from the sergeant and keeps his place, because it is 3 weeks to a royal wedding, and even sinners are labour. And that evening Master Geoffrey stops beside your mattress, looks at the lath in your hand, and delivers the longest personal speech you have heard from him in 14 months. I had a stick, he says, ash, not oak, kept it 9 years, till they made me yeoman, and gave me the book. A pause. The book is better, but the book believes whoever speaks loudest at the door. A stick believes your own hands, and your own hands are the only thing in a king's house that will never lie to you. He straightens the press cloth with 2 fingers, needlessly, precisely. You did well, boy. He walks away 4 steps, stops, and adds, without turning around, the sentence you will still be turning over on the last night of this story. Mine, though, a count that saves you is a count that can hang you. The stick doesn't love you, it just remembers. You lie awake a long time that night. In the chest across the room, dent side down, Silver remembers too. The princess comes up to London on the 12th of November, and the city goes out of its mind. You don't see it. I want to be honest about that from the start of this next part, because this is a story about service, and the first law of service is that history happens in the next room. While Catherine of Aragon rides through Cheapside on a mule harnessed in the Spanish fashion, with her hair down her back under a little hat, past 6 pageants the city has spent months building, castles on carts, a mechanical heaven, children in wings speaking verses at her in Latin she is too polite to look tired of. While all of that is happening, you are in the Ury at Westminster with your arms in cold water wringing, but you hear it. That is the thing nobody tells you about great events. They arrive first as sound. The noise of the city comes down the river all afternoon, over the water, through the shutter. Not voices. Nothing so particular as voices. Just a low, steady roar like weather that has decided to be permanent. Hugh comes back from an errand to the wharf with his eyes enormous and his cap gone, talking before he is through the door. The conduits in Cheapside are running wine, actual wine, out of the public pipes, free, into any vessel or any open mouth the city cares to bring. The goldsmith's row has hung out every piece in every shop, so the whole street bakes in the November light like one continuous crown. And at one of the conduits, he says, there was a pageant of the heavens with spheres that turned. Turned how? Engines, Hugh says, with the deep satisfaction of a man who has no idea. Engines and angels, Nick. Engines and angels. Master Geoffrey lets him finish, which is itself extraordinary, and then sets you both back to work with one sentence. The water they wash with tomorrow will not carry itself. And that is the entire and complete comment of the Ury of the King's household upon one of the greatest civic spectacles in the history of London. The count is the truth. Everything else is noise, because tomorrow is the 14th of November. Tomorrow is the wedding. And here is where your luck, the small, strange luck of the invisible, comes in. The marriage is not at Westminster. It is at St. Paul's, up in the city, and the feast after it is at the Bishop of London's palace beside the cathedral. And a feast of that size does not live off one bishop's pantry. It borrows. It borrows plate. It borrows hands. And it borrows linen. And linen means the Ury. And the Ury means that at 4 o'clock on the morning of the wedding of Arthur, Prince of Wales, you're sitting on the tail of a cart in the dark, with your legs hanging over the back, guarding a mountain of diaper cloth through the streets of London. You, Nicholas, from a village near Ware, riding the king's linen to a royal wedding with river fog in your teeth. The city smells different before dawn on a feast day. Underneath the usual smoke, mud, the low tide breathing up between the houses, there is roasting. Everywhere, roasting. Whole streets of it drifting between the overhangs, beef fat and burnt sugar and bread ovens that have clearly never gone cold all night, because half of London is cooking for the other half, and the half that isn't cooking is already drunk. You pass men asleep in doorways with wine cups still upright in their hands. You pass an entire family, respectable, wool-hatted, camped on the steps of a church with blankets and a cold goose, holding their place on the procession route the way pilgrims hold a shrine. The fog is cold enough to ache in your ears and nobody cares. A boy your age runs alongside the cart for 100 yards, for no reason, just to be running, and peels away laughing, and then the street opens, and St. Paul's stands up out of the fog in front of you, and you understand why they built the pageant small. So the cathedral would win. You have seen it before from the river from a distance the way you see a mountain. Up close, at the West End in fog, it does not look built. it looks grown. The spire goes up and simply leaves. Men say it is near 500 feet to the cross at the top. Men say a lot of things, but your neck reports that at a certain height the stone stops being architecture and becomes weather inside, where you carry the linen through a side door under the eye of a sergeant. The nave runs away from you into candle smoke like a street roofed in stone, and down the middle of that nave the carpenters have built the thing all London will remember until London burns, a bridge. A walkway of timber, raised to a man's height, railed on both sides, covered, every inch, rails and floor and steps, in red cloth, running from the great west door the whole length of the nave to a round stage at the crossing, a mount of steps, red like everything else, directly under the tower. The church will pack to the walls, and every soul in it will see the whole thing, because the bride and groom will walk above the crowd, raised up like figures on a shelf. It is the Uri's own doctrine written in timber. They must see the water arrive and never see it travel. Whoever designed this understood ceremony the way Master Geoffrey understands it, as engineering. Your work is at the bishop's palace, next door, dressing boards, and so you see the wedding itself the way you have seen everything at this court, sideways, in fragments, in the 2-second gaps between duties. But the fragments are these, and you will keep them all your life. A 10-year-old boy in silver, leading the bride the length of that red bridge. Henry, Duke of York, the king's second son, given the task of escorting the princess, and where his brother walks the way careful men walk on ice, this one walks like a drum, chin up, chest out, delighted, taking the eyes of a packed cathedral full in the face the way other children take sunlight. Keep him like that. There will come a reason. The bride and groom, both in white satin, meeting on the mount. From your angle, through a forest of shoulders, 2 small white figures very high up, and the words of the vows lost entirely, and then the trumpets from the vaults going off all at once like the roof tearing, and under them a sound you've never heard before, a cathedral full of people, cheering, and one more fragment which you only understand because Hugh, who knows everything, breathes it in your ear while you both stand pinned in the crush with towels over your arms. High up on one side above the crowd there is a latticed closet, a screened box built out from the wall. Behind the lattice, if you look, a shadow. The king, Hugh says, and the queen beside him. Watch the whole of it from up there, private. Paid for the greatest show London ever staged and watched it through a screen. You look up at the lattice, and the lattice looks back and gives away nothing. Of course that is where he is. The whole day says magnificence. The screen says the magnificence is the point, and he is not. A king who puts himself out of sight at his own son's wedding, so that nothing on that red bridge is looked at except what he built it to show, the future. You think of the counting house, the finger going down the page. This day is a page too, and he is at the foot of it, small in the margin, initialing. The feast at the bishop's palace you serve blind, the way all great feasts are served, from the passage side, in the heat and shout of the plate room, where the noise of the hall comes through the wall like surf, and you judge the courses by the trumpet blasts. 12 dishes to a course for the high table, and that is the high table alone. You never see the princess eat, you see what comes back. That is the Uri's view of any feast, the returns. And this is where you notice, for the first time in your life, the thing this whole story is named for. Notice it as a fact of scraped silver, long before you have any idea what it means. The prince's dishes come back barely touched. Not the princess's. She eats carefully, some of everything. A girl with two countries' manners to keep at once. The prince's. Swan in chaudron, venison in frumenti, a crustade royal that took some cook a day of his life, back through the hatch, disturbed at the edge, tasted and abandoned. 15 years old at his own wedding feast, the most expensive meal that will be served in England this year, and he eats like his father. A little of one thing, a little of another. Some of it is nerves, surely. Some of it, men will say later, was health, and I will be honest with you when we come to what men said later. But part of it, the part you can see from the plate room, is training. He was raised on ordinances. He eats what the schedule says in the amount the schedule says, and the schedule does not care what day it is. At the boys' end of the palace, past midnight, when the boards are struck at last, there is a moment historians will never write down because nobody wrote it down. A dozen borrowed servants, you among them, eating the returns off scraped dishes, fast standing, grinning at each other with cheeks full. Peacock, it turns out, is dry. Swan is greasy and tastes of pond. The pastry of a crustade royal, 3 hours cold, is the best thing you have ever eaten in your life, and you're not sure anything will ever beat it. That is the wedding of Arthur and Catherine from below. Kings above, cold pastry below, and in between, holding the two worlds apart and together at once, cloth, which you now count at 1 in the morning, piece by candlelight, before it goes back on the cart. 2 of the napkins are wine-stained past saving. It is written down, even tonight. Especially tonight. Nothing lost. Only accounted for. But the wedding, it turns out, was only the church door. The feast, the real feast, the one the king has been sharpening for 2 years, happens the week after, at Westminster, at home, in the great hall under Herland's angels, and that week is the reason this story exists. For 5 days the court keeps holiday, and the palace turns itself inside out. In the palace yard they have built galleries and a tilt yard, and every afternoon the flower of England in plate armour runs at each other with lances, while the king and queen watch from a stage hung in cloth of gold, and the crash of each course comes over the rooftops into the Uri like a tree falling, again and again, followed by that same permanent weather roar. Hugh gets 1 hour at the rail on the second day, by a swap of duties so complicated it amounts to finance, and comes back unable to say anything except that one knight came into the yard in a pavilion shaped like a ship, on wheels, with sails, crewed by men dressed as sailors, and that another came in a dragon led by a giant. You believe him. By this week you believe everything. But the knights belong to the hall, and the second night belongs to you. Because someone must stand at the Uri board from the beginning of the banquet to the end of it, all night at the foot of the cupboard of estate, keeping the basins filled and the towels folded and the water warm against the moment rank requires it. Master Geoffrey takes the office himself, of course, but a yeoman's arms cannot be in 2 places, and so a boy is chosen to stand behind him in the alcove all night, and pour, and fetch, and be furniture, and the boy is you. Hugh calls it luck. Master Geoffrey calls it nothing at all. He only looks you over from cap to shoes with a towel-deciding look and says, "Clean hands, shut mouth." And your mother, 2 days' walk away in Hertfordshire, will never know that the whole of her advice was in the end a job description. I want to slow down now and give you this night properly, because you will never see anything like it again, and neither in a sense will England. Westminster Hall, lit. Not lit the way you know rooms to be lit. One candle against the dark and the dark winning. Lit with intent. Torches in brackets down both walls. Wax candles in iron branches. The light climbing the arras and setting the gold thread in it moving, so that the woven kings on the walls seem to breathe. 600 people and more on the benches, silk and fur and chains of office, and the steam of them rising into the roof where the angels hang face down out of the shadow, with their shields on their breasts catching glints like the drowned looking up through ice. And against the south wall, the cupboard, 7 shelves, rising like a cliff. You watched it stocked and counted in, every piece called aloud, answered, marked, and now it stands in the torchlight doing exactly what it was built to do, nothing. Gold plate, gilt plate, cups and flagons and chargers and basins, tier on tier of it to well above a tall man's reach, and not one piece of it will touch food or wine tonight. It is there to stand. It is the rain, stacked. 14 years of fines and rents and careful mornings in the counting house, saying to Spain and to everybody, measure us. You stand at the Uri board in the alcove at the foot of it, jug in hand, and across your shoulders all night. You can feel it the way you can feel a person standing behind you. The feast itself moves like a tide under trumpets, course after course carried head high the length of that enormous floor, and you pour and fold and pass and are invisible. But what nobody warned you about, what you will be turning over for the rest of your life, comes between the courses, the pageants, the far doors open, and into the hall, on wheels, silently. The wheels are the marvel. You learn afterward they were hoofed with felt, comes a castle moving, towers, battlements, windows lit from inside, ladies leaning out of the windows, children of the chapel sitting up in the turrets, singing so high and clean it lifts the hairs on your arms, the whole engine drawn by 4 great beasts, lions, a hart, an ibex, each beast being, as you can very well see and entirely refuse to care, 2 men in a sewn skin. The castle rolls the length of the hall and comes to rest, and then the doors open again and ship comes in. A full-rigged ship sails set, in the middle of dry land, in the middle of the night, in the middle of a room, her crew casting anchor with reel cable, hailing the castle as though it were a harbour, and then a third engine, a mount of green with trees and herbs on it, and armed knights upon it. And the knights come down and assault the castle, a small polite thunder of it, until the ladies yield, and come down, and dance. You're 14 years old, holding a jug of rosemary water, watching a ship sail into a building. Behind you stands a cliff of gold. Above you, angels. This is what it looks like when the most careful man in Europe decides, once, to open his hand. Old Piers said it in the Wayfree a month ago, and you did not understand it, and now you do. Magnificence is a tool, and he keeps it in the sheath. And this hall, this ship, this impossible floating castle full of singing children, this is the sound the sheath makes coming off. And then the pageants are rolled away, and the dancing proper begins, and the night gives you the last fragment, the one every account of that week reaches for, the one even the official chronicler could not keep the life out of. The prince dances with his aunt first, Arthur, correct, careful, well taught. Then the little Duke of York stands up with his sister Margaret, 10 years old and 12, and they dance well, and the hall claps, and then the boy, in front of the king, in front of Spain, in front of 600 of the greatest people in the kingdom. finds his gown heavy, and stops and throws it off. Throws it. Casts it to a gentleman like a man casting off a coat to fight, and dances on in his little jacket, stamping, spinning, blazing, and the hall roars, and you look past the dancers to the high table to see what the king will do. The king laughs. You've been at this court 14 months and you've never seen it. The queen beside him is laughing too, applauding, and for 4 seconds the two of them are not the crown and the crown's wife but a mother and a father, watching their boy show off at a wedding, and the counting house does not exist, and the whole terrible arithmetic of the reign is just a man delighted by his son. Hold that too. Hold it carefully. It is the last time you will ever see them like that, and this story from here on is the story of what that laugh cost. Late, very late, comes the voidee, the last small ceremony, the spice and the wine that ends a feast, the signal that the kingdom may go to bed. It is your office's hour and Piers's. In come the spice plates, in comes the hippocras, the hot-spiced wine, strained clear through a long cloth sleeve. The apothecaries call the sleeve Hippocrates' sleeve, after the old Greek physician, which is how a dead doctor 2,000 years gone ends up with his name inside a wedding. And in come the wafers, hundreds upon hundreds of them, pale gold, thin as leaves, every single one struck between Piers's irons by Piers's own scarred hands over the last 3 days, in a closet of a room, alone. 600 of the greatest people in England take a wafer apiece from silver, dip, eat, and will never once in their lives wonder where wafers come from. You know. That is the difference between you and them, and by now you have stopped wanting it changed. Somebody has to know. The hall empties toward 2 in the morning. The torches are dying in their brackets, and the pages are asleep where they sit, and the last lords go out talking too loudly the way men do when the wine is in and the ceremony's over. And then comes the part of the night that is yours alone, the part you were truly posted here for. The gold must be counted before anyone sleeps. So at some black hour of the morning, in the wreck of the greatest feast of the reign, spilled wine going sticky on 200 feet of linen, dead torches smoking, the castle and the ship and the mountain standing dark and abandoned down the far end of the hall, like toys left out by a giant child. You stand at the foot of the cupboard, holding a candle while Master Geoffrey and an officer of the jewel house go up the 7 shelves piece by piece. The voice, the answer, the pen. It takes above an hour. Your arm shakes holding the light. Your feet stopped reporting to you around midnight, somewhere far below. And the count comes out right, every piece, and the chests are locked, 1, 2, 3, and Master Geoffrey looks at the ruined, magnificent hall, and then at you, swaying over your candle, and says the second longest sentence of his year. Now it's paid for, he says. Bed. You sleep 4 hours and are scouring by 8. The morning after the greatest night of the reign, the Uri smells of cold wine as rosemary, and the count is called and answered like every morning. 12 spoons of the best sort. 12, one of them lying dent side down, answering with the rest, lying in both senses now, and the ordinary machine of the house closes over the whole blazoned week, like water over a stone. That is how it works. This house, this reign, maybe this world. The feast is the exception. The count is the rule. You're beginning, dimly at 14, to suspect that the feast was never the opposite of the counting house at all, that they are the same instrument, that the ship sailed into the hall for the exact same reason the initials sit at the foot of the page, but you cannot hold the thought yet because you are asleep on your feet. Hold the other thing instead, the laugh, the boy dancing in his jacket, the Queen's hands applauding. Winter is coming down the river. In December, the court begins to drain. The hired hands are paid off and sworn out. The borrowed plate goes home under guard. The lords ride back to their shires with their 100 liveried men apiece. And the palace, which has spent a month at full roar, goes quiet in stages, like a kettle coming off the fire. And in the 3rd week of Advent, the Prince and Princess of Wales leave for Ludlow. This is policy, not sentiment, and even the boys of the Ury understand it. A Prince of Wales does not learn to govern by standing next to his father. He is sent to the Welsh border to Ludlow Castle, 140 miles away, where he keeps his own court and his own council and signs his own letters, a practice kingdom, a kingdom with the stakes filed down. Arthur has been doing it, on and off, since he was a small boy. Now he goes back a married man, 15 years old, with a wife of 16, to keep a winter court in the hills. And here is a thing I want you to have, because it costs nothing tonight, and it will cost a great deal in a few minutes of listening time. The rules that govern that boy's days at Ludlow, when he rises, when he hears mass, when he eats, what he eats, who tastes it, when the doors are shut at night, when the candles are put out. Those rules were not written for him. Household ordinances are like tablecloths, too costly to make new when an old one can be cut down. The pattern for a Prince of Wales's regimen at Ludlow was drawn up a generation earlier in careful loving detail by a father for another boy sent to the same castle. For Prince Edward, the last Prince of Wales but one. You may know Edward better by the shape of his ending. He is the elder of the 2 boys who went into the Tower of London in the summer of 1483, in the reign before this one, and did not come out, and whose fate is the argument of arguments. I will not settle it tonight, because it cannot be settled, and this channel does not sell guesses as facts. What is sure is the paper, the timetable of a vanished child, reused, clause by sensible clause, to order the days of the heir of England. Rise at a convenable hour, mass, breakfast after, meat and drink of the honest sort, and no surfeit, nothing sold, nothing wasted, everything written. Even his sons, you see, even at 140 miles. The King's table at Westminster groans under swan and sturgeon that he barely touches, and his heir in the hills eats by a dead boy's schedule, measured, tasted, inked. When people in later centuries put it the way the title of this story puts it, that even his sons would not eat what he served, they are gesturing at something true and getting the mechanism wrong, and the mechanism is better than the legend. His sons did not refuse the feast. The feast was never offered. What a Tudor prince was served morning and night was the regimen, the ordinance, the taster, the count. The magnificent table was an instrument of state, like the great salt, like the cupboard of 7 shelves, meant to be seen, not eaten. And the sons were instruments of state too, and instruments are kept dry, and wound carefully and locked up at night. The younger one most of all. Hugh, who by now you've understood is not a gossip but an archivist with no book, assembles for you, across that winter, the household legend of the little Duke of York, that his days are ruled by his grandmother's book, my lady the King's mother, Margaret Beaufort, a small iron woman in widow's black who has buried 4 husbands, heard mass more times than the chaplains, and drawn up ordinances for everything from the lying in of queens to the airing of the nursery. That much is documented. Her regulations survive, and historians read them still. That the prince's meats are plain, and his hours fixed and his exercise prescribed, and that at 10 years old, the boy who threw off his gown before 600 people is fed, in effect, by the same hand that rules the account books by schedule. Where the book of legend ends and the kitchen talk begins, I will mark for you honestly. Nobody wrote down the boys' dinners. Boys' dinners are beneath history, but keep the shape of it, because the shape is load-bearing. The widest king England will ever have, the man who in 40 years will need a machine to hoist him onto a horse, was raised in the most supervised, most measured, most counted childhood in the kingdom. Remember that when you meet him again in the paintings, holding the whole roast of England in his fist. Nobody in those paintings is hungry the way a watched child is hungry. They leave on the shortest days of the year the prince's household in frost, a long train of carts and horses smoking in the cold. And the Uri says goodbye the only way this house knows how to say anything, by transfer between books, because a prince's travelling household must be furnished, and furnishing means linen, and so for 2 days you and Hugh count cloth out of the Westminster presses and into travelling chests for Ludlow, diaper and twill, towels and board cloths, each piece called, answered, marked out of Master Geoffrey's book and onto the roll of the prince's officer, who signs, you fold. You have become, this year, a good folder. There is a way of folding a damask cloth so it rises out of the chest a season later, without a wrong crease in it, and Master Geoffrey has put it in your hands the way smiths put an edge in steel. The last chest is corded shut in the courtyard in a wind that smells of snow. The prince's officer signs the roll against the tail of the cart, gloves off, breathing on his fingers. And that is it. That is the whole farewell. Ink in cold air, going stiff on a page. Some of those towels you've handled every week for a year, and you will never see them again, and there is no reason on earth for a boy to feel anything at all about towels, and you stand in the courtyard with your hands going numb, feeling it anyway. You did not see the prince leave, you saw the linen leave. In this house that is the same sentence. Christmas comes small and warm after the wedding's enormity, and it is the best fortnight of your year. The court keeps the 12 days at Richmond, the king's new palace up the river, finished only a year ago and still smelling faintly of cut stone and lime. A palace so bright, so many-windowed, so hung with weather vanes that sing in the wind, that men have already stopped calling it by its old name. The household goes up by barge in relays, plate and linen and boys, the tide doing half the rowing, and you see London from the water in winter light, the bridge with its houses, the wharves asleep, the 100 church towers, the smoke standing straight up from 10,000 chimneys into air the colour of a pearl. There is feasting, but easy feasting, family-sized by this court's standards. There are players and carols in the hall, and a Lord of Misrule to turn the order of the house upside down for a fortnight, by ordinance, of course. Even the disorder here is scheduled, and you find you love it anyway, or maybe because. On St. Stephen's Day, Master Geoffrey gives you and Hugh each a penny for the season, gravely, as though executing a treaty, and Piers, without one word, hands you a broken wafer, and Hugh a whole one, and pulls the shutter of the wafery closet down over your thanks. You realise one night on the straw mattress, the realisation arriving the way warmth arrives, without a border you could point to, happy, fed, warm, competent, trusted with damask. It has been a year since you could say all 4 of those words at once. Say them. Sleep on them. Because Twelfth Night is coming, and Twelfth Night in this house is not only the end of Christmas, it is the audit. You have known it was coming since October. You have gone to sleep knowing it, and woken knowing it. 90 nights and more. The knowledge lying under your mattress with the lath like a second stick. Or on 12th night the Christmas of the household ends, and in the days after, before the court moves again, the jewel house and the counting house together weigh the plate. Not count it, weigh it. Every basin, every ewer, every cup and salt and spoon goes into the balance against the inventoried weight in the book, because counting catches theft, but weighing catches shaving. The oldest silver crime there is, the thin harvest of a file's edge along an underside, ounce by stolen ounce across a year. The book remembers what every piece weighed when it was made. The balance discovers what it weighs now. Between those two numbers there is nowhere at all to hide. A dent, you have told yourself all winter, weighs nothing. A dent is the same silver, moved. The balance will pass it, and the balance will pass it. But a weighing is not done in the dark at the daily counts pace. The weighing is done by daylight, at a table by the window, piece by piece, slowly, under the eyes of a jewel house officer whose whole profession is the surfaces of precious metal, and who will turn each spoon of the best sort in the light before it goes into the pan. You know all of this. You have known it for 90 nights, and on the 4th of January in the year 1502, 2 days before the audit, you take the spoon out of the chest at the evening count, and you carry it to Master Geoffrey at the press, and you put it into his hand dent side up, and you say, in a voice that comes out smaller than you had rehearsed it, "Master, in October, it was me." Silence. The candle spits. He turns the spoon in the light, exactly the way the jewel house man would have turned it, and looks at the little bruise in the gilt lip of the bowl smaller than a barley corn, the size as it happens of exactly one winter. October, he says, the last week of October. Your heart is going like the rabbit again. The night before the linen broke, I struck it on the tub iron. I turned it down and said nothing. I meant to speak after the wedding. Then I meant to speak after Christmas. Master, I'm speaking now because of the weighing, and I know that's what it is, and I won't dress it better than it is. I'm not brave. I'm only ahead of the balance. And Master Geoffrey, yeoman of the ewery, servant of 3 kings, does the last thing you expect. He sets the spoon down on the folded cloth, and he takes off his spectacles. You did not know until this moment that he owned spectacles. And he rubs the bridge of his nose, and he looks at you with his naked, tired eyes, and he says, "I found it in November, boy, the second morning after the hall was cleared. The floor moves very slightly under you. You counted a marred piece back into the king's chest," he goes on, level as a beam, "and I let it lie there, dent down, 10 weeks, to learn which you were. There are 2 kinds in this trade, the kind the balance catches, and the kind that comes to the press on its own feet, ahead of the balance, and says the true month. The second kind is rarer than the diaper. I have had one other in 30 years. He puts the spectacles back on. He's talking to you. You stand there. There is water in your eyes, and you're furious about it, and there is nothing whatever to be done. The accounting, because there is always the accounting. The spoon goes to the king's silversmith to be raised and burnished, and the fee is 8 pence, and the 8 pence comes out of your wedding reward, the little sum every serving boy was given for the great week. It empties it, almost exactly. and Master Geoffrey watches you count it out coin by coin onto the press cloth, and does not soften the arithmetic by a farthing. The entry in the book reads, in the clerk's fair hand, marred in service, mended, charge to the boy that marred it. Your name is not written. You understand by now what that is. In the language of this house, a name withheld from a book is tenderness, and he lets you carry the spoon to the smith yourself, across the frozen courtyard to the little forge-warmed shop by the jewel house, and stand by while it is mended, which is not punishment, but curriculum. The smith is a Fleming with forearms like Piers's, and no opinion of small talk. He sets the bowl over a dome of boxwood and taps, not hammers, taps, tap, 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 turning tap, a sound like a very small patient bird, and the dent rises out of the silver the way a breath leaves, gradually and then completely, and then the burnisher, a smooth blade of steel worked in tiny circles, until the gilt closes over its own memory and shines. 20 minutes, 8 pence. A winter of lying awake, undone by a man with a stick of boxwood. Silver forgives, the Fleming says, holding it to the window light, turning it. Good metal, silver. It remembers, but it forgives. He hands it back. Men should be silver, hey? On 12th night the audit comes and goes. 2 days of scales and daylight and monotone, and the jury's plate passes, weight and surface, every piece, and the books are signed, and the king's initials go onto the foot of the leaf that contains, somewhere in its columns, dissolved into the general health of the house, your 8 pence and your winter. The count is the truth. But you know something about the count now that you did not know in October, and it is this. The count does not ask to be feared. It asks to be joined. Stand outside it and it hunts you. Stand inside it. Bring it your broken things yourself, ahead of the balance. And it is the strangest of all shelters, a roof made of arithmetic. You sleep the night the audit closes, the whole deep night without waking, and the lath under your mattress is just wood. You're 14 years old, and you think the lesson is over. The lesson is not over. The spring is coming when you will watch the most counted house in Christendom meet the one thing that cannot be counted, weighed, mended, or entered, and you will learn what the count is actually for. Not yet. For a few more pages, let the palace sleep well. Lent comes in February, and the whole shape of the table changes, and I want to show you a fast day at this court, because nothing tells you more about what the food here is actually for. You would think, anyone would think, that a season of fasting would rest the kitchens. 40 days without flesh meat. Surely the great machine slows. It does not slow. It changes key. On fish days, and this court keeps them all, every Friday and Saturday the year round, every vigil and the whole long tunnel of Lent, because this king's piety is as regular as his bookkeeping and quite possibly the same organ. On fish days the table simply performs abstinence at the same magnificence as it performs plenty, instead of swan, sturgeon, instead of venison, porpoise. Yes, porpoise is a fish in the reckoning of the church, along with barnacle geese and by some opinions beaver tail. And no, nobody at the scraping end of the jury has ever been asked our opinion of the theology. Salmon and lamprey, pike and plaice, eels from the fen country packed in barrels, herring white and red, salt cod out of Iceland seas, oysters by the horse-load. Fresh fish in February costs what it costs, and the accounts pay it, and so the counting-house king keeps the fast, keeps it strictly, eats it sparingly, a little of one thing, a little of another, at a price that would feed a parish till Easter. Denial, performed in state, is still state. The empty dish is a ceremony too. You fold towels through that first Lent of 1502 to the smell of stockfish and mustard instead of roasting, and file the observation away with the others you cannot yet use. At this court even hunger is upholstered. The news from Ludlow all that late winter is ordinary. That must be said because of what comes. Letters move. The Prince's council governs. The linen you counted out in December is presumably being counted by other men in another cold room, left edge going, right edge coming. In March you turn 15 and tell nobody but Hugh, who marks the occasion by giving you the better mattress edge for one night, a gift of frontier land. The days lengthen. The river loses its iron smell. In the first week of April the court is at Greenwich, the Queen's favourite of the houses, low and pleasant by the water, and the Ury travels with the court, and so it happens that you are there on the morning it comes. You will tell it always as the morning the water went cold, because that is how it reached you. Everything at this court reaches you as water, linen, or a door. A rider in the night from the west. That is nothing. Riders come every night, but this one came through mud to the girth, they will say after, having ridden as men ride when what is behind them is worse than any road. And what he carried went not to the king but to the king's council, and the council, taking counsel of their own courage and finding none, did a thing that tells you everything about the size of what was in the letter. They sent for a priest. The king's confessor, a friar observant, one of the Grey brothers whose house stands at the palace gate, was asked to be the one to carry it in, because there are weights in this world that only men professionally acquainted with God will lift. And in the morning, a Tuesday, when you are at the Ury board warming the first water, word runs through the house the way fire runs under thatch, silent, then everywhere. The confessor is gone into the king before his hour, and the king's water is not called for. The warm basin stands on the board going quietly, filmy, cold, and nobody comes, and that has never happened, not once in your 2 years, and that is how you know, before any word is spoken, that somewhere the count is broken past mending. What passed behind that door was written down. A household account of it survives, and historians have handled it as gently as anything in the archive of this reign, and I will give it to you nearly as it stands, marking, as promised, what is record and what is not. The friar asked the king to receive what God sent. Then he said it. Your dearest son hath departed to God. The prince had died at Ludlow 2 days before, the 2nd of April 1502, of what sickness no man could certainly say then, and no historian can certainly say now. The sweat was in the March country, and some say consumption, and some say other things, and I will not sell you a cause of death that 5 centuries of learned argument has not produced. 15 years old, 5 months married, and the king, this is in the account, sent for the queen, saying that he and his wife would take their painful sorrows together. She came, and the record gives us through some servant's eyes at some door's distance. Eyes placed exactly where yours are placed, which is why I have carried you 2 years through this palace, to stand you here. It gives us the queen, doing the bravest bookkeeping of the reign. She reminded him, with full great constancy, as the account says, that his mother had borne no child but him, and yet God had preserved him and brought him where he was, that they had a fair prince yet, and 2 fair princesses, that they were both young enough, that God is where he was, and is enough for us both. God is where he was. Hold the sentence. It is the count, spoken by a queen. What remains? Called aloud, answered, so that the house can stand 1 more hour. She held him up with an inventory. Then she went to her own chamber. And there, the account says this too, and if you take one thing from this whole night, take this. There her own loss came upon her so suddenly and so heavily that her people could not comfort her, and word of it was carried to the king, and the king came to her, and he, in his turn of true, gentle, and faithful love, comforted her as she had comforted him, each one in the other's sight, the strong one, each one alone, broken. 2 people who are married for policy, taking turns at courage in the worst morning of their lives, at service distance from 100 watching servants, 40 feet from a basin of water going cold on a board. People will tell you the miser king had no heart, and they will have the fines and the bonds to point at, and we will come to the fines and the bonds honestly. But that morning is in the record too. Both are in the record. The count is the truth. All of it, or none. The house goes into black. And I mean that as work, because to you it was work. Mourning at a court is not a mood, it is a refit. Black cloth moves through the wardrobe and the ewery by the cartload. Bright arras comes down, dark goes up, the trumpets stop, the chapel drapes, even the table dims. No subtleties, no gilded peacocks now, the diet of a house of mourning plain and correct. Ceremony with the colour drained out and nothing but the bones of order left. And you discover the thing that will carry this story to its end. The ceremony does not stop. That is what it is for. The water is warmed and carried and poured over the king's fingers, morning and night, exactly as before, rosemary and steam, though his face above the basin is a locked room. The count is called and answered in the ewery at dawn. 1 salt, great of estate, 12 spoons of the best sort, though the voices calling it keep their eyes down. The house had built over years a machine of hours, and now the machine holds the house up. Grief cannot get a footing in a day with no gaps in it. Later you will understand that this is half of what ritual has ever been for. At courts, in villages, in your own century, listener, in the small liturgies of anyone's worst week, the casserole, the folded flag, the neighbours filing past. Something to do with the hands, at the hour when the heart is nothing but weather. The prince is buried at Worcester, in the cathedral by the Severn, 3 weeks and more after his death, with the full slow pomp of a state funeral, and the ewery's linen goes west for it while you stay behind. You serve that funeral the way you have served everything, by cloth, at distance. But Hugh's network reaches even into Worcestershire, and the tale comes back, and one detail in it you will keep forever, because the herald who kept the record of that funeral kept it too, being unable not to. It rained. It rained as men could not remember rain, the foulest cold, windy, wet day, the roads west so drowned that at the last stage the horses could not draw the funeral chariot through the mud, and they brought oxen, and it was oxen, plough beasts, farm beasts, your father's kind of beasts, that drew the Prince of Wales the last miles to his grave, through the rain, past the standing crowds of ordinary sodden weeping people, the most counted child in Christendom, whose days were ruled by a dead boy's timetable, whose wedding filled a cathedral with trumpets, hauled to the door of his tomb at an ox's pace, at a plough's pace, at the pace of the actual muddy country he was to have ruled. Somewhere in the Uri accounts of that season there is an entry for linen delivered for the interment of the Lord Prince. I have not seen it, and I will not invent its wording for you. But you folded it. Give your hands a moment, and they will remember. At the gate at Greenwich, that April, the voider goes out as always. Mourning multiplies alms. The broken meats of grief feed more paupers than the leavings of any feast. That is the old arithmetic of funerals. And Joan is at her post at the left of the gate in the man's russet coat. And when you hand down the bread, she does not snatch and run as the others do. She stands a moment, looking up at you, quick-eyed under the big rolled cuffs, and she says the only full sentence she has ever spent on you. They say the king cried. Aye, you say. They say so. She thinks about it, chewing nothing, the way the hungry do. Good, she says at last, and is gone through the crowd with the loaf inside her coat, and you stand there with the empty basket, 16 kinds of tired, understanding her perfectly. Not good that he grieves, good that he can. The poor keep accounts too, and at the gate of the palace the only coin that matters is proof that the man inside is made of the same stuff as the queue outside. He cried, entered, answered. Good. Summer comes anyway. That is the discourtesy of summers. The river turns soft and brown. The meadows across from Greenwich go white with May, and the court begins not to heal. Watch this house closely, and you will not use that word, but to reorganize around the wound, the way a tree grows round a nail driven into it. The Queen is much with the King. The little Duke of York, motherless, brotherless, suddenly everything, is now heir of England, and the watch on him tightens from careful to airless. The boy who danced in his jacket now walks to chapel through his father's own chambers, guarded, scheduled, inspected, a whole rain's remaining eggs in one supervised basket, and by midsummer, quietly, and then not quietly, the word runs through the household from the laundry upward, because at a court, listener, all the oldest news travels through the laundry, and I will leave the mechanism to your imagination. The Queen is with child. We are both young enough, she had said in the worst hour, holding the King up with an inventory. It had not been only comfort. It had been, like everything else this family says, a plan. The house that lost its heir will make another entry. Against the dark of that spring, the whole palace holds up this one small lamp and carries it toward the winter, carefully in both hands, the way you carry the warm basin down the dark passage. Slow steps, eyes on the surface, spilling nothing. I want to give you the Queen, as the accounts give her, because her account book from this very year survives. Her privy purse expenses, the small private spending of Elizabeth of York from the spring of 1502 onward, kept by her clerk, paid out in shillings and pence, and printed for the world to read 3 centuries later. Historians who want the queens of legend find it disappointing. Historians who want a human being find it almost unbearable. It is all small. Boat hire on the Thames and the boatman's reward. Offerings at this shrine and that altar, a few pence at a time, a widow's mite from the richest woman in England, and offerings that grieving summer at Our Lady of Walsingham, and half the holy places of the realm sent by proxy riders, pence by pence, a mother dickering gently with heaven, rewards to servants who brought her presents, to one for bringing cherries, to poor women at her gate, money to her sisters, who married less luckily than she did and needed it. And through it all, steady as a pulse, the entries that undo you if you stand too close, payments for the mending of her gowns, for new covering an old gown, for furring an old gown against the winter. The Queen of England, wife of the wealthiest king in Christendom, whose husband's cupboard of estate stood 7 shelves of gold high, while 600 people ate below it, that queen wore her dresses until they needed mending, and had them mended and the mending written down. You know this house now. You have lived in it 2 years, so you will not make the easy mistake with that entry. It is not misery. It is not the miser starving his wife, whatever the buttery says. It is the same doctrine you scour into silver every morning of your life. Magnificence is a tool kept sharp, kept sheathed. The gown is mended because the gown is sound, and the money is for Walsingham, and for sisters, and for boatmen, and for the man who brings cherries. In this family the gold stands on the cupboard, and the people underneath it live, by choice and training both, like the caretakers of the gold. All of them, even her. Even now you cannot decide, and I will not decide for you, whether that is the saddest thing in this story or the finest. Christmas of 1502 is kept at Richmond again, and it is a low fire compared to the year before, warmth without blaze, carols without the Lord of Misrule's full riot. The Queen is great with child and keeps much to her chambers. The King is threadbare in the face in a way the black clothes only partly explain. But the house is not unhappy, or not only. There is the lamp after all. There is the entry to come. The letters are already drafted, Hugh swears, announcing the birth. It is a house in the last month of holding its breath, and on 12th night the audit passes. Your second, and this year just work, scales, daylight, monotone, no rabbit in the chest of you at all, and that is its own quiet coronation, though nobody sees it but the 12 honest spoons. And in the deep of that January, upriver at Westminster, the King begins a building. On the 24th day of January, 1503, the first stone of a new Lady Chapel is laid at the east end of Westminster Abbey. The King's own foundation, planned for years, priced, contracted, counted, meant to be the most glorious burial place in the island, a stone casket for the dynasty. Painters and masons will labour on it long after every person in this story is dust. The fan vaulting they will hang under its roof will make grown architects sit down. And the man who paid for it is founding, though he intends it as a monument to the family's triumph, what history will use as the family's tomb. 18 days he will have between that first stone and its first work, because the Queen has taken her chamber in the Tower of London. That is custom, not omen. Do not let the later centuries whisper doom at you. The Tower in this reign is a royal residence in good standing, whatever else its walls have held, and the Queen's lodgings there are comfortable and hers, and it stands convenient by the river, and a Queen's lying in follows my lady the King's mother's own written ordinances. The chamber hung and carpeted, the light kept soft, the world kept out, women only within, and every furnishing prescribed down to the cushions. The ordered house does what the ordered house does best, it prepares. The Uri's part goes by barge, fine linen, counted out of the book, for the chamber of the Queen. You fold it yourself, at the press, in the short blue light of a winter afternoon. Rise out of the chest without a wrong crease. It is the last service your hands will ever do her. On Candlemas Eve, the 2nd day of February, 1503, in the Tower of London, the Queen is delivered of a child, a girl. They christen her Catherine, and mark the name, Listener. the same name as the Spanish daughter-in-law widowed 10 months before. One Catherine mourning at Durham House while another is carried to the font, this family folding even its griefs and its hopes into the same cloth. The birth has come early, hard on the Feast of Lights, before her month was looked for. For a few days the letters are hopeful. Then the fever comes. Childbed fever is the oldest tax on this world, and it does not read inventories. It does not care that the chamber was hung by ordinance, that the cushions were prescribed, that the linen was diaper of the finest, folded by a boy who was careful. The king, they will write, sent into the country in desperate hours for a physician, sent men riding through the February dark with money no object, the counting-house doors standing open. Spend anything, spend everything, and you may stand a long time before that entry, because there it finally is, the whole answer to the riddle of the miser king written in a dying week. The man saved like a clerk his whole life so that, at the 1 hour buying could matter, he could buy without counting. And it did not matter. That is not in the accounts. That is the thing the accounts are helpless against. She dies on the 11th day of February in the Tower, in the morning. It is her birthday. Elizabeth of York, 37 years old that very day. Daughter of a king, sister of a king, niece of a king, wife of a king, mother of a king to come, the white rose, the still point of the whole loud dynasty, the woman who held a broken man upright, with an inventory in the worst hour of the reign, gone between the calling of one morning count and the next, and now I will pay you the debt I contracted at the very beginning of this night. I told you when you first knelt in the Uri with sand in your knuckles that you would hear Master Geoffrey say his sentence again, in a place and on a night you could not imagine. Here is the place. Here is the night. The word comes down through the tower and out to the household in the grey of that morning, and the house stops. Actually stops. You will never forget the sound of a palace not moving. And in the Uri of the tower, a small stone room, older and colder than Westminster's, the morning count stands abandoned in the middle, chest open, plate half called. Master Geoffrey is standing at the board with the book in his hand and his finger in the page. An old man, you see suddenly. Servant of 3 kings, and now the burier of a queen he has served since she was a bride. His spectacles are in his other hand. His eyes are shut. Hugh looks at you. You look at the floor. Nobody in the room is breathing right. And then Master Geoffrey puts his spectacles on and opens his eyes and says, "To the plate, to the book, to the room, to the dead queen, to God," in exactly the flat, dry voice of every ordinary dawn of your life. The count is the truth. 2 basins of silver, parcel gilt, with 2 ewers to the same. 2, you answer. Your voice cracks on it. And 2. 12 spoons, silver and gilt, of the best sort. 12! And the count goes on, steady, to the end, and the chest is locked. 1, 2, 3, and the day's service begins, because the house must eat, because the morning must be dressed, because the machine of hours is all there is now, and every soul in the room knows it. That is what the count is for, boy, not the spoons. It was never for the spoons. It is so that on the morning the world breaks, there is one true thing left that still answers when you call it. The king takes his grief the opposite way, and the record sets the 2 ways side by side without comment, and so will I. The chronicle says that when she was departed, he privily departed to a solitary place, and would no man should resort unto him. The most watched man in England, the man who lives his whole life in front of 600 people, walks out of the ceremony entirely. No basin, no rosemary, no cloth of estate, and shuts a door, and is, for days, simply a man alone in a room with the one ledger line that will not reconcile. When he comes out, he is visibly older, and within weeks he is dangerously ill, and though he mends by summer, those who see him after say something in him is altered for good, and the rain's remaining years will bear them out. The heart, it turns out, keeps its own privy purse, and the withdrawals from it that spring are never repaid. The funeral is the last great ceremony you will serve in this story, and the strangest, and the most beautiful, and you will serve it with the herb chest open at your knee, its second meeting with you as promised. Count them, once for a dead prince's linen, once now, filling the censing pans and the strewing baskets. Rosemary above all, armfuls of it for remembrance, the country people's meaning now and no other. She lies in state in the tower chapel, watched day and night by her ladies. Then, on the 12th day, the procession, the coffin on a chariot drawn in black velvet, and upon the coffin you see it pass from your place in the ranked household along the way, and your skin moves on your bones. An image of the Queen, an effigy, carved and painted, dressed in her own robes of estate, crowned, her hair loose about her shoulders, her sceptre in her hand, so like her that the crowd along the streets makes a sound that is not weeping and not cheering, but some third thing older than both. And about the chariot and lining the long way from the Tower through the city to Westminster, torches, hundreds upon hundreds of torches, the companies of the city standing with them lit along every street, and at the churches as she passes, 37 virgins all in white linen with chaplets of white and green, one for every year of her life, holding lighted tapers, still as posts, the small flames all bending one way in the February wind. Her years, counted in girls with candles, even now, even this, the house mourns the way it lived, by number, called and answered, and for once, this is what undoes you, standing in the cold with your office around you. For once the counting does not look like coldness. It looks like the only language large enough. 37 candles, 37 years. The count is the truth, and the truth is carried through the streets with its hair down, crowned, while a whole city stands still with fire in its hands. She is buried at Westminster with a queen's full rights, and in time the king will lay her in the very chapel whose first stone went down 18 days before she died. Under the roof the masons have barely begun, and he will join her there himself when his own entry comes due. And there they lie now, side by side in gilt bronze, in the most beautiful tomb in England, made by a Florentine with a broken nose who once brawled with Michelangelo. You can walk in off a London street and see them this very year of your listening, the miser and his mended gown queen, lying easier than they ever stood, with the fan vaulting above them like linen shaken out once and frozen forever. The wafers at the funeral feast are Piers's. I told you at the beginning of this night. Scouring sand, funeral wafers, and a king who counted his own spoons. And you thought, perhaps, that funeral wafers was a strange thing to promise a sleeper. But a month's mind and a burial feast take their spice and their wafers like any other solemnity. Grief at a court is catered, and so the old man stands his 3 days at the irons again, hiss, flip, hiss, and the passage by the kitchen smells of a baker's heaven while the whole palace wears black. And this time he gives no sayings out to anybody. Only when the last batch is boxed, and the boy from the spicery has carried it away, he sits down on his stool by the coals. Bosworth Piers, 60-some years old, forearms starred with 40 years of small burns, and puts his face in his 2 scarred hands, and you step out of the doorway quietly and let the wafery keep what the wafery holds. The little Princess Catherine follows her mother within days. The entry is short. The chronicles give her a sentence, the accounts a burial, God a soul small enough to carry in one hand. In the ewery you fold the black cloth back into the presses at the season's end, and the house comes slowly off its knees, and the year turns toward a spring that nobody has the heart to call by its name. That is the wind of this story, listener. It has finished blowing now. Everything after this is the going down of the air, and you may let go of whatever you've been holding, because the house, hollowed, halved, still counting, is going to stand. It was built by a man who assumed catastrophe the way other men assume weather. It stands. On a soft grey morning in the late spring of 1503, old Piers takes you up onto the roof. There is a stair. There is always a stair. Palaces are honeycombed with the narrow dark ways of the people who carry things. A turning stair in the thickness of a wall, and then a low door, and then wind, and you come out onto the leads beside the great hall of Westminster, on the walkways the plumbers use, with the ridge of Herland's roof standing over you like the keel of a ship the builders left upside down, and all of England's morning laid out flat below. Piers comes up here, it turns out, every spring once to look. The plumbers know him. Nobody has ever asked why, and he does not say why now. He only stands with his scarred forearms on the parapet, getting his breath back in instalments, and lets you look with him. The river first, because the river is everything. The Thames going down silver brown toward the city, crowded even at this hour, wherries and barges and a tilt boat with some early lord in it. The water doing what the water has done since before there were kings to tax it. Then London itself downstream, a mile of smoke and spires inside its wall, the bridge with its houses standing in the stream on its 19 feet of stone, and over it all, over everything, pools. The spire you stood under with the linen on your arms, near 500 feet of it, men say, holding the city down like a nail through a paper. Westminster below you, the abbey with its new chapel growing at the east end inside its web of scaffolding, stone coming up the river even now to feed it, masons' hammers going tick, tick, tick across the morning like the small patient bird that mends the world. The courtyards of the palace foreshortened with boys crossing them carrying water, walking, not running. Furniture from up here, invisible even to each other. And beyond all of it, west and north, the country. Fields, and the smoke of villages going back and back into the haze, until somewhere out in that grey-green distance is where, and a woman who gets 1 letter a year, and beyond her 140 miles of England, a cathedral by the Severn with a boy in it. Every spring since the old king's time, Piers says at last to the view, not to you. Come up, count the city still there, go down. He turns his head. You know what he keeps it all for yet? Him below, with the initials. You've had a year to work on it. The feast nobody eats. You asked it your first month, I'm told. Whole Ewery heard about it. You have thought about it on and off for 2 years, and in the thinking it has changed shape the way silver changes under the burnisher. And standing up here, over the whole visible machine of the kingdom, you find it has come out simple, the way Master Geoffrey always said true counts come out. It's not food, you say. It never was food. It's the count served hot. The house saying itself out loud twice a day, so everything under the roof knows the roof holds. He doesn't eat it because it isn't for eating. It's for being seen. like the gold on the cupboard, like the water, and you're slower here, because this is the part that took the winter and the tower morning and 37 candles. And he keeps it up when it's hollow, especially when it's hollow, because the day the table stops, everyone in England knows the house is falling. The feast is the flag still flying. You serve it hardest the year there's least to celebrate. Piers looks at you for a long moment, the longest he has ever looked at you. The burns on his forearms like a sky of old stars, a man who has fed the losing side and the winning side of the same country and outlived the difference. 16 years I've watched this court from the coal end, he says, waiting to hear somebody say it that plain. He straightens off the parapet. You're the least number in the book, boy, but you're in the book. Mind that, both halves of it, all your life. Now go down. The count won't answer itself. And that is the whole of your mountaintop, and it is enough. You go down the dark stair behind him, back into the smell of stone and tallow and rosemary, and the door closes on the sky, and this story begins, gently now, to close its books. So let us settle the accounts, everyone, the way the house would want it. The king lived 6 years more. I will not dress him up for you. They were the hard years, the years the reputation is made of. With the queen gone and one boy left, he trusted arithmetic more than ever and mercy less. And the bonds and recognizances tightened over his nobility like wet rope drying. Great men bound in ruinous sums for good behaviour, debts hung suspended over heads to guarantee obedience, and 2 clever lawyers, Empson and Dudley, working the machinery so hard that their names became a hissing. That is documented, and no honest telling of this reign leaves it out, and I promised you at the start I would not choose one hand of this king and hide the other. He grew grey and ill and thin, audited to the last, and died at his shining palace of Richmond on the 21st of April 1509, and was carried to the abbey and laid where he had planned it line by line beside her. The first thing his son's new government did, almost the very first, was arrest Empson and Dudley. The crowd cheered. The books balanced. Even that he might have understood. The little Duke of York. But you know, of all the people at that wedding, you know what became of the boy in the jacket. Kept mewed like a hawk through his boyhood. A Spanish envoy who saw it wrote home in 1508 that the prince was kept as close as a girl, spoke only when spoken to, and left his rooms only through his father's own chamber. That letter survives, and then, at 17, in one April week of 1509, out of the cage and onto the throne with the whole treasury of the most careful reign in memory under his hand. He married his brother's widow within 2 months, Catherine of Aragon, who had waited 7 thin years in England for the accounts to decide her fate, was crowned beside him at midsummer, and their story you may find in every other history of this century ever told. This channel has told some of it, and it does not belong to tonight. What belongs to tonight is only this. The supervised child, the boy fed by schedule under his grandmother's iron book, became the king who ate as though avenging himself on every measured plate of his childhood, the king of the 6-course breakfasts and the 55 palaces, and the armour let out and let out and let out again until the waist of it measured 54 inches around, the widest king as promised in English history. Even his sons refused to eat what Henry VII served at court. And then one of them spent a reign eating everything else. Whether the second fact is the revenge of the first, I leave. as the honest accounts leave it, unsigned. My lady the King's mother, Margaret Beaufort, outlived her son by 2 months, long enough to see her grandson crowned, and died with the ordinances still in force. Her tomb lies near theirs, and her colleges at Cambridge keep her name alive to this day. Master John Heron kept the chamber books on into the new reign, and the books themselves, the actual leaves, with the actual initials, HR, in the actual dried ink of the actual careful hand you watch moving in the cold light of the counting house, lie this minute in the archives in London, and scholars turn them gently with clean hands, which is the only part of this story's religion that survives entire. The Queen's little account book, with its mended gowns and its cherries, was printed in 1830, and you may read it tonight if sleep refuses you, though I warn you it will not help. Francis Bacon wrote the reign into its famous shape in 1622. A wonder for wise men, he called this king, and every telling since, tonight's included, has been arguing with him. And the roof, Herland's roof, the 600 tons of oak with the angels, stands. The palace burned around it twice. A bomb fell through the years at it. Kings and parliaments and revolutions passed under it. It stands, and you may walk beneath it on any wet Tuesday, and crane your neck at the same angels the boy saw, holding their shields, keeping their count of centuries. Of Master Geoffrey, of Hugh, of Piers, of Joan at the gate, of Nicholas, of the boy whose hands you have worn all night. The record keeps what I told you at the beginning it keeps. Nothing. History kept the spoons and lost the children. That was our contract, and I will not break it now by inventing them fine futures with dates on. Whoever the real boys were who scoured that silver on those mornings, and the real girl who waited at the left post of the gate, the ledgers closed over them like the river over a dropped coin, and where they went the ink does not follow. But this much is not invention. The offices went on. Some yeoman kept the Uri book at the boy king's coronation feast in 1509. Some boy answered the count that dawn. Someone folded the cloth. The house does not spend people, but it does not lose them either. It only, at the very last, accounts for them in a ledger we cannot read. And now the palace is quiet and the story is folded, and you are still here, in your own bed, in your own century, with your own small day put away. Stay with me a few minutes more. This is the part of the night that the whole night was for. Think how far you have come since the candle and the sand. You have carried water in the dark and gold in the torchlight. You have stood at the foot of a cliff of plate while a ship sailed into a building. You have heard a queen hold up a king with an inventory, and a city count a woman's years in candle flames, and an old man say the truth to a broken morning in a voice as flat as bread. You have learned the one secret this house has to teach, which is not about kings at all. That ceremony is not the opposite of love, and counting is not the opposite of grief. They are what love and grief do with their hands, at the hours when hearts are nothing but weather. The casserole, the folded flag, the candle, the count. The seasons you served are still turning, the same wheel. Autumn, and the carts of cloth coming up from the wharves. Winter, and the audit, and the low fire of a careful Christmas. Spring, and the soft grey mornings on the leads. Summer, and the river going brown and easy past the gate where the bread goes out. The same as the year you came, the same as the year after you left. The same as all the years stacked behind your own bed tonight. 500 of them and more, shelf on shelf, like a cupboard of a state going up into the dark. Centuries will pass. The palace you've served all night will change beyond recognition. The counting house will burn, and the courtyards will vanish under new stone, and the river itself will be walled and tamed and lit. The great salt will go into the melting pot in some later king's war, and the diaper cloth will wear to lint and be lost, and the language of Uri and Voidy and Month's mind will dry up out of English like water off a board. But people will still lay tables for their dead and their married, still fold cloth carefully because someone they love will touch it, still count in the worst weeks whatever is left to count, days, candles, blessings, breaths, because counting what remains is the oldest way the living hold the roof up. Some things do not change, the hands do not change. What the hands are for does not change, and the day is over now, truly over. The count is called and answered. The chest is locked, 1, 2, 3. The gold is dark on its shelves, and the linen lies folded in the presses, rising creaseless toward morning, and the last torch is out, and the great roof holds its angels over the empty hall, and every door between you and the cold is shut. You're warm enough. You're safe enough. You have done enough. You have a bed and a roof, and a morning that will keep until it comes. That is more than most of the souls in this story ever held at once. That is enough. That is enough. That is enough. So let the ledger close. Let the ink dry where it lies. Let the palace sink back into the dark river of years that carried it here, and let the river run on without you till morning. Let it come now, the sleep. Let it take you the way the tide took the barges at Greenwich, loose from the wharf and easy, no oars, no hurry. Let the bells go quiet, one tower at a time. Let the count run down, 12 and 11 and 10, softer, and 9 and 8. The voice further away now, 7 and 6, someone else answering, 5 and 4, not your watch anymore, 3 and 2. Let your hands uncurl. They have carried enough for one night. Let your thoughts slow and soften and settle like sand in still water, and finally stop. Nothing is lost, little one. It is only accounted for. You've earned this rest. Take it. Good night.